Opportunity. To compete in today's landscape, organizations must have the skills and talent to leverage all that data effectively. They must acquire the right technology to empower people to do more.
AEG is a number of industries. We have AEG Sports, we have AEG Presents, we have AEG Facilities.
We have an immense amount of data flowing through our engagement strategies, being able to analyze that data and have a workflow that services it and puts it in the hands of our relevant department heads in a way that they understand and can act on it is the most important thing.
Microsoft Power BI is delivering new experiences, powered by advances in cloud computing and artificial intelligence that help every user more easily explore and understand their data.
Each time the car is going around the track, we are producing gigabytes of data that can be analyzed, and there will be a competitive advantage for any team that will be capable of implementing some artificial intelligence into analyzing all those data.
I think being smarter because we master our data and the way those data flows seamlessly into the team will make a great difference in the future.
Unlock the opportunity of abundant data through innovations in AI and the power of the cloud. Power BI from Microsoft.
Good morning. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at PASS. It's always fun to be here talking to you all. If you are online or watching it afterwards, good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time frame it happens to work for you. My name is Kamal Hathi. I work in the Power BI product engineering team here in Seattle, in Redmond. And it's a fascinating video we just saw. It talks about how the world's changing, transformation, data, using AI and insights, and we'll talk about all of those things in today's session. The one thing that's interesting about it is it's all about information. It's about how do we get the information and what do you do with it? And so to really get us thinking about this, I want to take you back in time, maybe a little story, if you will, to help us understand how we got to this point. Where did we get the information? How was information unlocked? And how are we making use of it now to really, really transform how the world's working? So we'll go back in time a little bit, and we'll go to the year 1440. Any guesses about this year? What happened then? Any thoughts? Anyone? History buffs? People who read stuff? That's important, actually. Turns out this is the year when a gentleman by the name of Gutenberg in Germany invented a thing called the printing press, right? Heard about that? And what happened is that this was really a watershed point, because prior to Gutenberg inventing the press, books and information that books provide were rare. In fact, they were available to very few people. You had to be rich, or you had to be in the church, you had to be somebody important. Maybe you were a noble person. And you got books that were written by hand, transcribed on vellum, animal skins, written by monks, sitting in dark, cold back rooms, creating information on demand, which might sound familiar to some of you, but But the printing press changed all that. And literally, in a short time as history goes, from 1440, if you go forward to 1600 or so, the availability and price of books just completely plummeted, completely changed. We went from a few people with lots of money and lots of power getting access to books to anybody. Like pretty much anyone could go out, get a book, get information, and start to learn. Not only did the price of books go down, it wasn't just about getting a Bible and learning about scriptures. The variety of books that you could get also exploded. We suddenly went from these few religious, controlled scriptures, thought police, to anything you wanted. Knowledge of all kinds of those locked up was suddenly available. Poetry, romance, anything. And really changed how the world was working. And with this, we saw a change where literacy started to climb. We went from a point in time where hardly anybody was literate to to by the mid-1800s or so, about a third of the population, a very big chunk of the population in certain countries in Europe and other places, were now reading. They were literate. They had knowledge. And it really started to kick in a big way, because if you look at this graph, something actually happened around 1850. What happened is that literacy just took off. You see this knee in the curve, and it just went through the roof. It just took off. So what happened? What happened in this time frame for the literacy rate to shoot up? What happened actually is that we had this virtuous cycle. People had knowledge. They used the knowledge to build things, to build machines, to build steam-powered things, mechanical machines, and that led to this thing called the Industrial Revolution. The worker skill set changed because people were reading and were able to understand how to do this. That fed more people working on this. That fed more machines and more industrialization. And we hit this stride where being literate paid more. The economics, the fundamentals of what people did changed. Not only that, from a societal impact, education became important. Countries who were educated were important countries. And so governments started driving education, and literacy just became universal. And that led us through the steam machine to the space age. Really has brought us where we are. Now, it's not just about reading and literacy, not just about the press and giving you a book to read. Today, if you look at it, it's also about writing. I think all of us, like literally every single person in the room, at some point today has written maybe an email, or maybe right now you are tweeting, you're using social media, right? And writing has become universal as well. In fact, social media has driven this growth where authorship is becoming as universal as readership. As a result, it's not just about consuming information, it's about creating. It's creation of information that's exploding as well. It's this creation of information, of data, that's becoming something that we all live with. Devices, IoT, digital devices are driving data all over the place, and that is the new value. And in a sense, we're living in a time where these digital devices, this data that's coming in, is driving what we call a digital transformation. The digital transformation, where data that's coming from all kinds of places is being interpreted, is being analyzed. You saw that video with AI, machine learning, BI, all these things are coming together to really drive this next industrial revolution built on this combination of big data, AI, cloud, BI, and all these things coming together. So the question now is, in this next industrial revolution, is there a printing press? Where's Mr. Gutenberg here? Right, that's the question. And in fact, there was a moment in this digital transformation, in this new industrial revolution, where we have the equivalent of a printing press, and it's this guy. And if you know what this is, I show it in many presentations, so maybe you've seen it before. That's VisiCalc, that's right, it's VisiCalc. VisiCalc was the first electronic spreadsheet that people could use on their personal computers to work with data and interactively get information and analyze it and make sense out of it. Prior to VisiCalc, to get data, to get a report, to get information, you had to go to folks in IT. I used to work in IT. And like those monks, I sat in a dark back office and by hand transcribed reports of people. And my social life wasn't that different than the monks. But that was the case. IT controlled everything. As soon as VisiCalc came in, bang, all of a sudden, you had the ability for individuals on their own to be able to go out and start to get value and unlock it. And so with VisiCalc and Excel, who's the spiritual successor in terms of spreadsheets, what we see now is this evolution that we can look at in terms of BI, where classic BI is help spread this notion of data literacy, where we started off with IT giving data to some people, now more people are consuming it. As soon as the spreadsheet came in, this notion of self-service BI really starts to make more people get literate with data. More people in an organization are able to take their information in their own hands, analyze the data, and make decisions, which are super critical in this a time of digital transformation and this new industrial revolution. But this brings us essentially to the point that we saw before with literacy and going to 1850s where it was sort of plateaued out, 33% of the population roughly. In organizations, if you look around, roughly a third of the people or so are comfortable working with spreadsheets, working with data, reports. It's not universal. Data literacy is not a universal thing. It is not yet feeding this industrial revolution and really making companies succeed at an unfair advantage. It turns out companies that are more data literate, if you will, have more people who work with data at all levels, are actually doing better. The more you use the data, the better you perform. And so with this said, at Microsoft, our goal is to drive what we call a data culture. A data culture is where everyone, from stockroom to boardroom, everyone is able to work with data, unlock the data, get insights, and drive this universal data literacy, this data culture. And it's driven by things such as AI, machine learning, that is not just about artificially doing something that people do, but it's assistive. It's assistive intelligence. It helps people do their job better. It doesn't replace them. And so things like AI can come in and help, in IT, the IT guy do a better job of configuring, managing the network, and really assist there. It helps data scientists to explore and find patterns to give to the people. It helps, analysts who work in BI to build dashboards and reports, and we'll see some of that. And ultimately, it helps the business user, in many cases on their own, to find value in data and be data literate and drive this digital transformation. And that really is what enables a true data culture. And so in order to see this in action, which is the best way actually to see it, I can talk till I'm blue in the face, the best way to see it in action is to see a demo. And so Kim Manis, who's a group program manager for our Power BI desktop, is going to come on stage and show us some of the stuff in action. So Kim, all yours.
Oops. Hey, so Kamal talked a lot about data literacy and data culture, and on the Power BI team, we really think about how are we going to lower the barrier to entry to work with data? How are we going to make it so that everyone in the organization can consume and get insights out of their data? So today, we're going to use a data set that we got from the US government around traffic fatalities. And this is a good data set to work with in that we all know a bunch of safety rules about driving, right? We know we're not supposed to text and drive. We know drinking and driving is bad. We know we should always wear a seatbelt. But we have our assumptions and we know these things, but sometimes just looking at data and working with the data really drives some of those things home, or maybe even tests our assumptions and will change our mind. So today we're going to drill into this report, and we're going to start by looking at these two maps on this page here. And immediately, a couple things jump out at you, right? California and Texas are really the drivers of these fatalities, and that makes sense. They're pretty populated areas. But if we go in and we adjust for population, immediately those trends start to change, right? You have states up here like Montana and Wyoming that are just really big states. And these states, it takes a while to drive everywhere. And it turns out that when you adjust for population, those insights start to change, and we can start to learn a little bit more. And I wouldn't have expected Montana to be kind of the highest state for fatalities, but it is. We have a bunch of slicers at the top, and we can start to ask questions, right? So we have this slicer that has the hour of the crash. Now, if we adjust that and we look at the really early morning hours, the 0 to midnight to 3 a.m. range, we adjust that, we start to see some trends change, right? The average age starts to go down. Now we're looking at average age of about 34. Alcohol involvement really starts to drive up, right? And you can kind of intuit that these are people leaving the bars at night and driving home. And the mix between male and female, male starts to go up. And if we keep working with this and we look at vehicle speed and we move that vehicle speed up to really high rates, the average age goes down even further, and the mix between male and female changes even more drastically. Alcohol involvement goes up even more. And again, these are just people driving late at night really fast, maybe after a couple of drinks. So just playing with the data and starting to ask those questions, we really get insights really quickly. So this is how you can consume data as an end user. You can work with data. But how do we go about authoring it and asking new questions? So we're going to switch to a new page here, and we're going to start just with looking at the different vehicle types, right? So we'll add vehicle type, and we'll add the number of fatalities. I'll go ahead and sort this. And immediately it jumps out that passenger cars are the #1 vehicle type. That kind of makes sense, right? Those are probably the highest rated, the most occurrence on the road. Let's keep going. So let's add date here, and let's look at fatalities over time and see if there are any trends. So we'll add number of fatalities, and we'll add the date. So immediately, a trend pops out, right? Fatalities were pretty high up until around 2007, and then it sharply decreased and really plateaued for a while. But in 2015, something's happening, right? It starts to go up again. And we'll look at that in a second. But first, I want to drill in. So let's drill in not to year, but down to the month level. And you start to see some seasonality, right? You see the summer months are really when traffic fatalities are at their highest. And I can start to play around and cross-highlight and see if there are any interesting trends. So with passenger cars, the seasonality evens out a little bit. But if we look at motorcycles, that seasonality really spikes. And that, again, kind of makes sense, right? If you're driving your motorcycle, you're probably not doing it in the middle of December. It's more likely when the weather's nice. And this is what has happened in the past. But I also want to know what's going to happen. I want to start to forecast the future. And previously, you would have to write an R script, you would have to know machine learning, but with Power BI, we've really given you a click away to do these things that used to be really complicated, really hard tasks, and we've made them really simple. So if we jump into the analytics pane and we go ahead and add a forecast, with a single click, we start to see how this data is going to happen in the future, and we can expand this and see that not only have we forecasted it, but we detected that seasonality, right? We saw that those summer months are going to continue to spike. So, another way that just Power BI is making it so that you don't need to be a data scientist to work with data and to become data literate and to tell that story. So let's keep digging in. So the question I had when I was playing with this data is, what is the safest car to drive? What should I be driving? So we're going to go ahead and add a scatter plot on here, and we'll use the make of the car, and we'll look at the speed that the car was going, and we'll look at the fatality rate of that. So let's go ahead and format that, make it a little bit easier to see. Let's fill the points, and let's add category labels. So this scatter plot, it has some obvious kind of clusters, right? And we can eyeball it and see there are a couple vehicles that have very high fatality rates and very high speeds. And there are some that have very low fatality rates and never really seem to get above 50 miles per hour. So, I can eyeball this, or I can run a clustering algorithm. Again, this is something that you really, you used to need to know how to write these algorithms, how to use these machine learning tools that were just difficult for normal end users to, spend the time to figure out. Now I can go ahead and automatically find clusters, and I can run this, and Power BI will run these machine learning algorithms in the background. They'll do the k-means analysis. I don't need to know what that is, but I just get the insight that I was looking for. So again, now that we're looking at it with the clusters, those clusters really jump out, right? We have those clusters at the top, these really fast, high fatality rate vehicles. And if we go ahead and slice on them, we immediately see that those are mostly motorcycles, right? These are your Ducatis and your Kawasaki's. And we also have this other cluster here, right? These very slow, very low fatality rate vehicles. So if we highlight on this cluster, you see that these are your heavy trucks, right? It turns out this car over here, this is a Gillig. It's a mail truck, so the likelihood of you getting injured in an accident with a mail truck is pretty low. They don't go very fast. And the great thing about this clustering algorithm is not only can I use it in this visual, I can keep reusing that data. So I can go into my other charts and I can take this cluster and I can drag it on. And now those trends continue to jump out at me, right? And those motorcycles really pop out and those heavy trucks really pop out. So we've really tried to simplify and lower the barrier to entry to find your insights. Now, let's go back to this line chart we were talking about earlier, and let's remove the forecast, and we'll zoom back out, and we'll look at the year. So we saw this trend earlier, right, where in 2015, the data's starting to change, and it's starting to go up, right? Fatalities are starting to go up. So I can make a bunch of guesses. I can have a hypothesis. When I started playing with this data, my guess was that drunk driving was going up, maybe, that younger people are on the road, something like that. And the great thing about Power BI is we've brought in AI and machine learning not only to lower the barrier to entry, but also to help test your assumptions in a really unbiased way, right? So now I can go ahead and I can right-click on this point, and I can say, explain the increase. And when I do that, we're going to run a bunch of algorithms in the background and try to figure out what is causing the increase? What is that factor that caused that jump between 2014 and 2015? So immediately it jumps out at me that alcohol was actually not the driver for this change. Alcohol involvement actually went down between 2014 and 2015. So that first hypothesis I had was actually completely wrong. The second insight, it has number of drunk drivers involved in an accident is 0. So that's basically the same insight we saw before. So I can go ahead and I can downvote this insight. I can tell the machines, this insight wasn't actually important. It was a repeat of the earlier one. And when I do that, we're going to start to learn, right? And we're going to start to make this algorithm better and get better over time, just because of that input from you. Now, if we scroll down, there's an interesting insight here that I'm going to go ahead and just add to my report, and we'll zoom in on it. So I can go ahead and press the plus button. I'll expand this. And this visual, I could have figured out how to get it on my own. I could have put every category in and tested it until I found something interesting. But it just made my authoring process so much faster. And this visual isn't the easiest one to make on my own. And with a couple clicks, I got it added to my report. So we're going to go into the formatting pane, and we're going to change the breakdown of this one and change it down to 1. So the insight here is that the number one cause, about a third of the increase, was actually a collision where there wasn't another motor vehicle involved. It was just one motor vehicle. So if you think about that, like when I think about traffic accidents, I assume that everybody else is a terrible driver and I am fine and a great driver, and everybody else is unsafe, right? This insight is actually telling me that more often than not, it's your fault. These are people hitting a pedestrian or driving off the road. You can imagine maybe they're texting and driving and just not paying attention. So again, this was an assumption that I had, oh, there are a bunch of drunk drivers on the road. No, it's actually me as a driver, us as drivers, really causing that change. We talked a lot about authoring. But the other thing about data literacy and data culture is really making those stories compelling and making it almost fun to interact with the data and making it so that everybody wants to play around with the data and ask these questions. So we're going to jump to another page here. And on this page, I'm using the Power BI Custom Visuals platform that really allows me to customize my data visualizations to tell my specific story. So in this case, we're talking about cars. We have visualizations that represent the safest places and the most dangerous places to sit in the car. And again, I can slice and dice. I can look at, where should I sit on an SUV versus in a passenger car, what's the most dangerous spot. And creating these dynamic visuals, these really visually compelling reports, makes it so that those insights really jump out at you. So in the beginning, I was saying, wearing your seatbelt, it's something that we all kind of intuitively know we should do, but maybe we don't do it all the time, right? So if I go ahead and I cross-highlight on whether or not a seatbelt was used, so seatbelts that weren't used in accidents, immediately, our cars turn red. There's no safe place to sit in a car if you're not wearing your seatbelt. This is just a couple ways that Power BI is bringing data literacy to everybody and really lowering the barrier to entry to work with data. So thanks.
So thank you, Kim. That's a great example of, Kim on her own as an individual, working with data and getting insights and working with it, and really being able to use the power of AI and ML to unlock the capabilities. what I want to do now is to switch and talk about an organization, a company, that has been using data to make a massive difference, really transforming themselves, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are, Super Bowl champion team. They are an amazing organization. If you live in Seattle, you live and die by these guys. Their secret sauce, the players, of course, are amazing. The coaching staff is amazing. The secret sauce, in some senses, is data. It's how they use data and what they do with it to unlock the insights that are provided to them by things that they measure. And so the best way to talk about it is when I'm inviting Patrick Baumgartner, who's our PM, who works with this AI and machine learning technologies, and Dean Riddle from the Seahawks organization to come up here and talk to us about what the Seahawks do. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Yep, pleasure.
Great. This is good. So, hopefully some of you guys are familiar with the Seahawks in the NFL, and if not, they're a pretty big deal here in Seattle. They've been a highly successful franchise. And if you asked me, who would I want to meet at the Seahawks? A couple years ago, I might have said Russell Wilson or Marshawn Lynch. But today, now I know that the real interesting stuff is happening behind the scenes. And Dean, why don't you actually introduce yourself and talk about what you do with the Seahawks? And we're going to dig into how they use data.
Sure, no worries. And happy to be here. Not happy to follow that great presentation. And a little intimidated, actually, but I'm the applied sports scientist. I have an odd accent, so I'm from New Zealand. Before anyone shouts out, are you from Australia? Don't start with that one. I've actually just come straight from the VMAC training facility this morning. The guys are in practicing, so I've got a small window to come down here and present to you guys. So as an applied sports scientist, I've got a background as a strength conditioning coach, exercise science, and my specific role in the team of 3 is to look at the way we collect data and then the way we visualize it. We have a data scientist and a sports science specialist in our team to be able to make the other workings happen. So as the applied sports scientist, I've got a big background in actually working with athletes. And then what does it look like for us to be able to engage with data? And back to Kamal's opening presentation there, we're on that pathway, and I was sitting there next to our VP of IT and going, yep, that's exactly where we are. There's an enormous change happening, and so our job at the Seahawks is to do that.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that change and maybe what kind of data you collect and how you're using that data to help the performance of the
Well, surprisingly, and I know you've got a little bit of a brief on this, but today...
So actually, can we switch? Why don't we switch to the demo machine?
Can we switch over here?
Yeah, I think we are on... Make sure we get the number right. We got it? Yeah, we got it.
Nothing like a live presentation. Don't work with children or animals. So here we go. You can see there's actually this chap in here. So we've created a Seahawks player just for today. He is 6'2". He's 210 pounds. Actually, Jimmy Graham, he's going to take a break for the week because he's number 88. So this is actually a player.
Don't let my wife know that was for my online dating profile.
Wow. So we've got our new player here today, and so what I'm going to do is we start our day with a lot of different things which are occurring. And so one of the things that we do is you do self-reported questionnaires. And so actually we use facial recognition to open up a questionnaire. So when a player walks through, so Patrick is the player who's going to walk up, and that should recognize Patrick. As it does, and then he's going to answer this question, and you're going to answer this live, and I'm going to show you we actually analyze the data, because we have internal measures, we want to understand how the player is feeling, and so answer those questions.
So this is by far the coolest demo I've ever done, because I'm actually a Seahawks, I'm in the actual IT system of the Seahawks as a player. It probably only happened today, but I have 2 toddlers, and last night they ate a lot of candy, so my sleep was quite poor. Fortunately, I have not gone to the gym for quite a while, so my soreness is doing okay. But we actually had a demo machine blow up before this all started, so my stress level is actually a little higher. So I'm going to go ahead and say my stress is higher. And now this is what a player would do.
Exactly what they would do.
Okay, great. And how do you use that? How do you use that data?
So there's internal measures and there's external measures. So we will do some objective measures with machines where we'll actually test muscle forces, etc. But then we want to understand how you feel, because there's all sorts of things going on in a player's life. How they've played that weekend, what their travel was like, what's happening in their own home life with. It was Halloween last night, and I know one of the players was complaining this morning about his daughter's costume with glitter everywhere. He had to clean up before his wife got mad. These are human beings. They're not machines, and they're not industrial units. So we've got to deal with a lot of different inputs. And so we want to understand really what the player is feeling. How do they feel about how they're actually responding that particular day. So if we close this down, I'm going to come back into here, and I'm going to drop into here. And so we have Patrick, and this is what it looks like. So we'll hit refresh on that, and so it'll actually run it. And so these are the ways we're trying to get, as to your point earlier on, what does it look like to get to our consumer? So our consumer is the player. So you're the player. I want you to understand your data, own it, and then obviously react off the changes. We expect the players to play a game and have obviously a huge amount of contact, a lot of running soreness. What does it look like for them to have that and then still be able to go and train and do a training pattern through that week?
Yeah, so as a player then I can actually start seeing over time, you're helping me understand how I'm feeling, how I'm performing, how much load I'm putting on during practice, and so I can kind of keep that history and start comparing.
That's right, and so you can see here, obviously we haven't had Patrick in the squad for too many days. We've got some anonymized data there, but this is actually what a player will look at. So we can see what he's putting in as his normal results, and then what does that look like? It's only a simple method of using a standard deviation, but it's really impactful for the player. Getting them to actually see their data and understand it, and then we can then take action upon that. So if you've got an extraordinary amount of soreness or fatigue on that particular day, then we can actually do something about it. If we know before practice starts at 1:30, I'm either going to get the guys to do some extra recovery work, some soft tissue work, there could be some preparatory things, and then we actually don't go out in the training field and then break something, because that's the last thing we want. So once we've done that, we understand a little bit about how the player's feeling, then we obviously do some training. So I thought I'd do some training with Patrick. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, so I got a little bit of notice about this, and I don't think I've actually, I was told to practice jumping rope, but I don't think I've actually done this.
This is there, straight from the Seahawks facility.
Yeah,
so you're going to skip here for...
And I think was probably, what, an offensive lineman using this before me? It
could be challenging. So Patrick's going to skip for 22 minutes.
If I can do it here. This is...
What? Wow. No, keep going. Oh, okay, no, that's fine.
I don't think I'm going to get through rookie minutes.
So you can see, just drop it down there, Patrick. That was a fantastic effort. And so they go and they train, and then there's a training response. How hard was that practice? And we have technology that we have on the players. We use GPS units, and we count every single movement that they do on the field. And so then the other thing is we want to find out about, okay, how did you feel that practice session was? So then we'll go back up to one of the surfaces that we've got wall-mounted again in the facility. Takes your picture, opens up. So I need to, there we go. So this is a cool thing to show, actually. So I set a training session. So here we go. You're seeing this live, guys. This is pretty cool. So let me do this. So this is your training session here. And what time is it right now? Here we go, 22. So boom, 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 boom. So I'm going to set the training session, then we're going to just tell you something else. So I'm going to set the training session for 22. Next, save, boom. Okay, so we've got a training session happening at 11:22. So that's our management portal that we use, because you've got all the players, you have to manage them. Anyone saw that we actually had a trade yesterday, and so there's players coming in and out, so we actually had to have a tool for it. So Microsoft worked with us. So this is the SPP that we use to be able to manage, like indexing in the library, you know which is fiction, non-fiction, and then within non-fiction, where's the cooking books or where's the space travel. And so you want to be able to make sure that all our data, which sits in Azure, and then we can obviously use Power BI to visualize the data. So I've got the training session, and once it turns to 11:22, the training session happens, and then the players can then go and give us an answer to, that's my pet dog actually, Benson, by the way, if anyone had that question. We'll open up here. So the training session is happening, it's 11:22.
That's awesome to have.
And it opens up. And so the training session for this afternoon is at 1:30. And so after the session happens, guys will come off with their helmet and pads, and we want them to go up to it and say, how hard was that session? Not whether they've tried their best, because we know they always try their best. There's great energy there. The coach, the backside of it, great. But what did it look like for them? How hard was it for them? What was their level of exertion? So we asked them to do this questionnaire.
So I was going to put a 10 here, but then I was told what a 10 actually looks like for an NFL athlete. And in comparison to what I think that actually looks like, I was probably at a 4.
Okay, it closes after 30 seconds unless you do it quickly.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
There we go.
3. There we go. Submit.
And you know, the facial recognition has been a cool thing that we've been able to work with the guys at Redmond to be able to integrate into it, because our technology is talking to you. It's not just a device and we say, oh, here we go, this is a clipboard, here's my service. No, we actually want them to interact with it. And so our next evolution is what does it look like for the players to be able to truly talk to the data. And so what we do there, this is, again, what we'll look at after the training sessions happened. We'll just hit the refresh. And we'll say, okay, well, that was good. We finished the training session. What did it look like? And we're looking at a number of different data sets to say, okay, this is the cost of that training session. Not only the whole session, but actually individual reps within that, because we want to understand. And Doug Baldwin, if he's doing a load of short routes, the cost isn't very high. But if he's got a whole lot of seam routes going on, then the cost is enormous for him. So we want to understand that. We want to understand how much exertion he's put in order for him to be able to complete that session. And so that allows us to see there live, actually, his level of exertion for today's practice. And so then we could put that into our data ecosystem to say, okay, what's the right thing for them to do tomorrow? Because it's all about knowing how much they can do today based off what they've done yesterday or the last 6 days and actually what they've coming up the next day or the next 6 days. So that moment in time, we need to be able to capture before practice, before things start to happen and they run into each other, and then afterwards to make decisions about the next day. So that allows us to actually do that super quick, and then the players engage with it.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things here is when I think about coaches and I think about players, I don't think of guys that want to sit in front of charts and graphs and live data, but I think you're making inroads there in terms of showing people the value, and maybe you talk about the organizational change.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, this is my 4th season there, and so when we first started, you know, we didn't have an office space or desks. It didn't even exist, really. And sports science has been evolving within the NFL. It's a big buzzword a lot of people are talking about. So as an organization, we're engaging with it. The players are engaging with it. We've got much, much higher participation than we ever had before. And we're now getting the insights because we have enough data to be able to start to say, okay, now we start to see what normal looks like. You know, GPS units, when we first started, we had 12 being used for a squad of 63. I mean, it just didn't tell us anything, as opposed to the data set that you had there around the fatalities within the car accidents. You know, building that data set, having people understand it, part of that is them engaging with it to say, I see that, this is happening with me. Players are understanding how we're changing training for them individually, or the position group, or the team, and so that puts us in a powerful position going forward.
Well, thank you so much. You know, Microsoft talks about digital transformation, and this is one of my favorite examples of an organization that's kind of going through that digital transformation. And you think about, you know, players tracking their movement and having facial recognition when they show up at the training. And thank you so much for coming and sharing it.
No worries.
Sharing this with us.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
We'll hand it back over to Kamal.
Right. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Patrick.
You need us to leave the jump rope for you.
Yeah, that's fine. So on the side, Patrick's going to do it for the rest of the time, and we'll see if he still breathes after that. He's a very fit guy, as you can see. Patrick's amazing. So with that said, you know, this data culture we talked about, the question comes in is, you know, how can you as an organization actually adopt this? What can you do? How do we help you? And so I want to shift the presentation a bit more into what organizations at large can do and would do in a corporate environment. And so the thing that we tasked ourselves at Microsoft in order to get to this data culture and enabling everybody else, is this notion that we would, as a product development team, you know, strive to allow you to work with any data and in 5 minutes be able to take that data and get to some sort of an insight that would say, wow, I didn't know this. So this notion of a 5 minutes to wow, which you've heard us talk about a lot, has been our goal as an organization. And we're still trying to work on it, still trying to get there. But over time, that's what we're deeply pushing for. And the way we are trying to do this is obviously via this thing called Power BI. And Power BI is a cloud-based service that allows you to get data from anywhere, any kind of data from any kind of source, pull it together, look at it in various different forms. You know, with out of the box, for example, we have these content packs that allow you to go in and really get reports and dashboards pre-built for you without requiring someone to build them. You do work with real-time interactive reports that you saw, work with natural language. We'll see some of that later, Cortana, the digital assistant. All kinds of ways to really get value of the data and then consume it in pretty much any form that you want, from a web page to a mobile device to embed it inside your own line of business applications to inside Excel, pretty much any place you want. So any data from any place you want, in any fashion you want to analyze and get value out of it, is what Power BI truly enables. So again, what you're going to do is switch back to a demo. And Patrick, who's barely recovering from his jump rope, will be back on and show us a bit more about how organizations can use Power BI. And then we'll come back and talk a bit more about what we're seeing in the market. So Patrick, as you go and switch over, we'll do the demo. Now, it turns out that in case you're wondering why Patrick is doing all the switcheroo and what's happening is, maybe many of you had this happen, but just as he was getting ready to get on stage, the fall creators update of Windows 10 started installing. Our IT department said, today is the day, we're going to upgrade your machine. And he has this nice upgrade window flowing, and now he's trying to figure out how to go to the demo. So are you ready to go?
I think we're ready to go.
Okay, can you switch over to the demo machine?
Yeah, I'm on number 1.
Number 1, and we hope it's the fall creators update. You should get it updated yourself. Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
So anyway, back on stage. And when we talk about, so reset and get my thoughts together. But what Kim showed was an amazing set of capabilities for exploring data and building really rich and interactive reports. Everything from kind of this view here where I can slice and dice all the way down to that infographic of where car and traffic fatalities are happening. But the next step of that is how do I distribute it? How do I get this into the hands of all the people in my organization? And that's been a huge focus for us on Power BI, is to make it really easy to get these rich, powerful reports and solutions to everybody inside of your organization. So here I am obviously in the Power BI service where I've published this up and I have the same set of interactivity. If I have large data volumes where I want to keep things refreshed very quickly, kind of like what the Seahawks are doing, I could put this in Power BI Premium and get really tight control over the performance and the refresh schedule. But if I want to deploy it on premise, maybe I'm in a situation where I want to keep this data inside of my corporate firewall or combine it with paginated reports and other great things we do in the reporting services and on-premise product. We let you deploy that same artifact on-premise, and that's the mission of this team, is to keep making it really, really easy for you to stand up simple reporting solutions. But in addition to doing it just inside of reporting services or Power BI report server and the Power BI service, we can also then think about embedding it in other places. So here I'm in Microsoft Teams. And again, the Power BI team is taking this mission of how do we help you get this data to everybody in your organization? Because again, how do we get everyone using data to fulfill this mission of data culture? So here it is inside of Microsoft Teams.
Glad I did that.
Here it is inside of SharePoint. And again, the same set of technology, lots of rich out-of-the-box integrations, makes it really easy to distribute these reports. So in addition to just making it easy to integrate and easy to display, we're also really focused on partnerships and how do we help expand the boundaries of what you can do with BI by working with our rich set of ISVs and partners that are really helping add new scenarios to what we can do with Power BI. So I wanted to show you a couple examples of those as well, which really is, again, how do we keep fulfilling this mission of helping everyone experience their data? So I'm going to switch over to Power BI Desktop here. And I want to talk about geospatial. Mapping is a huge scenario, right? You want to understand how far things are apart, who lives where, and how do I map things. And we have this fabulous relationship with Esri, which is one of the world leaders in geospatial analytics. And so here I'm using the built-in Esri visual inside of Power BI Desktop. And with this, I can start doing some really rich geospatial analysis. So I'm going to go ahead here and go ahead and edit this report. And what the Esri visual gives me is a huge set of functionality, whether it's just I want to change the base map. I've got points here. This is a customer scenario, so these are all my potential leads for my business, and maybe I want to go do some analysis of that. The first thing I want to do is maybe change the symbol style, since the size doesn't really indicate things, so I want to control that. Maybe I want to change the color to something that fits my theme. And again, all this rich control over how I interact with and display this map. But I can do a lot of other additional really cool things here. So maybe I want to add a reference layer, and Esri comes in with a bunch of built-in reference layers, and we'll talk about extending that in a second. But now I could just say, hey, this is the average household income across all of these different places in the census, so I can see how my customers relate to those different areas. But I can keep going further. Maybe I want to drop a pin here, and maybe I want to throw in, let's just say, Oakland, California. There we go. So now I've got a pin for Oakland. And maybe I want to do a drive time analysis. So let's go ahead here and do a drive time from here. And let's say everything that I can get to within an estimated 15 minutes. So now I have a set of drive time around this point. And the great thing is not only can I do this analysis to really understand and visualize data, but again, it's fully integrated into what we do in Power BI. So now if I want to come here and I want to say, hey, I want to actually select this drive time layer, I can go and actually cross-highlight the rest of the report. So now what I've done here is I said, hey, who are all my customers within a 15-minute drive of downtown Oakland, and go and filter all this other data, or maybe have it impact some calculations that I have in this Power BI desktop file. And and again, I can do the same thing if I wanted to go select these reference layers. Do I want to be able to select a county down here and have what are my customers down here in the Silicon Valley area who I might want to go target with leads. And so really exciting things about this Esri partnership. Obviously, all the capabilities you've seen today are just available inside of Power BI Desktop. There's also now premium offers from Esri to buy international demographic information and raise limits across what they do with Power BI. So again, a really exciting partnership to keep pushing the boundaries of what you can do with geospatial, but still as easy as everything else we do in Power BI. But the partnerships and the integration doesn't stop there. Because again, if geospatial is key to your company, that's important. But as we saw with the Seahawks, a lot of times it's how do you take action? How do you help people interact with the data? And how do we visualize it in ways that make sense as well? And so for that, we actually have another set of really interesting partnerships in ways to extend the Power BI platform. So I'm going to switch here to another demo. And here I'm looking at, let's say we have a company that takes quotes from customers where they're asking for a quote on something they want to purchase. And then we have a whole process that we go through to get back to that customer with how much that set of goods is going to cost. And we go through a process to prepare that quote for our customers. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how we can take a scenario like that and really broaden its applicability. Again, as Kamal said, everybody from the executive down to the stockroom. How do we make BI applicable to all the people in my organization? And so if I'm a person who's managing this process, the first thing I want to do is understand how's the state of the process going. I've got this table up here that's actually looking for each step in the process, what are the KPIs we're using. And that's not necessarily a great way to visualize. There's better ways to visualize it. And actually, one of the best ways to visualize a process is with Visio, right? We have a great tool for visualizing that. So wouldn't it be great to be able to integrate Visio just seamlessly into my reporting? And so I can actually do that here. All I have to do is copy this link. I can come to this table, and I'm going to switch it to this Visio visual. And all I have to do is drop in this URL and click Connect. And just with a click now, not only have I added the Visio diagram, but it's also, let me go to focus mode so we can see this, it's also bound each of these tiles to data just by looking at the names of the data and the names in the Visio diagram file. And if the field isn't great, I really actually love this. The Visio team actually built this integration with us, and they did just this fantastic job. If I want to come in and say bind something else here, I could hit sales queue and say, I'm going to call this into, delivery, or I can actually leads into opportunities. I need to deselect this one. Yes, I want to change the link. Click it into leads and opportunities. And just like that, I can actually go and bind the data on the fly. They've made this thing super easy to use and really open up a lot of new possibilities for how I format and visualize data. Now, I want to come back and keep going with this. How can I improve this process? And maybe what I'm going to do is I actually have an average end-to-end time across the whole customer that I'm going to drive into the color saturation here. So I can really see, it looks like we're doing okay with Lucerne publishing, but we have this problem with Parnell Aerospace. And it looks like, actually, when I click on this Parnell Aerospace, I've got some problems in, telesales and contract approval. That's what these little squares say. I don't have Zoom in it's set up on this machine. But I can see, from the diagram, there's processes in my flow. And now, again, this comes back to, okay, now what? Most people want to take action. So how do we start connecting this data in BI into taking action, right? And so we have another way we can do that as well. And so we have, again, a great set of integrations with another offering we have inside of our family of offerings called Power Apps. What Power Apps lets me do is build a really lightweight, quick forms input and application that I can run on phones, and now I can run inside of Power BI reports. And so it turns out this app, I've got it open in the browser here, just lets me come in, select a customer, and then edit, how am I processing this customer's leads? How am I prioritizing it? So this was the app that the person managing this process might use to go update information. And what I can actually do is just take this app ID here, and I'm going to integrate this right into this report, just in a similar way we did to Visio. So I'm going to take my customer account ID, and I'm going to put it here. And I might have to oh, you guys are seeing something incredibly exciting. We're about to ship this feature, and my demo changed with the last release. So, because I'm in MSIT and I picked up the new visual. Okay, so, so what you're actually seeing there is this is about to ship, and what you're going to get with that experience is a new experience where I don't actually have to drag and drop that ID. I can actually select the app and launch it. Now, this is a feature people are really, really excited about, and so as I sit here with egg on my face, this is actually coming in the next couple of releases, so I apologize about that. But the great thing is it gives me a way to connect insight into action right in the context of my reports. Now, there's one last demo we're going to try to do here as I kind of recover. And I want to actually come back to the data culture theme. So I'm going to plug my, I'm in actually number 2, and maybe we can switch to my iPhone. Okay, are we good? Okay, so we're going to switch to back to that traffic data set here. And at the beginning of this demo, I talked about how easy it is to get data and distribute it to users. And if I'm trying to address an executive in my company, or maybe it's a football coach or a football player, sometimes you need to meet them where they are. And that's one reason we've invested so heavily in really, really first-class mobile applications for Power BI. And so I'm going to come to my Power BI application here. And you can see I've actually got the same set of information that we were working with, that Kim was working with, and I've gone ahead and published. And just with one click, I can get it opened and optimized for my mobile device. But also when I think about wanting to meet people where they are and help them understand and use data, we have to think about experiences that are applicable to everyone. And that's one reason we've invested quite heavily in natural language and other types of interactions with data. This is actually a feature that's still in preview for us, but we think about it as a virtual data assistant, right? And so this is something that's looking at the data you have access to and trying to help you navigate through it and help you ask questions to understand your data. And so I might come in here and just ask about seatbelt use. And so I can just ask, seatbelt use here and hit go. And I'm running this over everybody else's cell phone reception. But it went out and actually just went and got me the number for seatbelt use. Okay, that's pretty cool. But it also did something else. It looked at the data I was asking about in the same set of algorithms and engine that we were running in Kim's demo when we did explain the increase or explain the decrease. We ran those same set of algorithms and actually came back and found an insight related to seatbelt use. And so I can just continue the conversation here. And I can say seatbelt use is trending upwards just by hitting Insight 1. And I can see actually over time, the percentage of people using seatbelts is going up, which is a really good thing, because I don't know if you saw in this first number here, there's actually 52% of people that died in a traffic fatality. It means 48% of them weren't wearing a seatbelt, right? Which is kind of a stunning number. At least it's trending upwards. And now I can kind of keep asking this conversation. So I could say, for let's just do for Washington. And so, all time for people in Washington, I can just have a conversation with my data here. And it pulled it up, and at least it's a little bit higher than that national average at 60%. And to come back to this, and I actually wanted to leave on this, because one of the interesting things about a data culture is you see this number, and you think, God, 40% of people that died in a traffic accident weren't wearing a seatbelt. It's almost preposterous to think about. But and that's the idea of putting data into people's hands, like even if it's a coach or a football player or any of us in an organization, is sometimes when you have access to data, things that you might not listen to become really, really obvious. I'm as guilty as anybody of sometimes not wearing my seatbelt, but after you see these kind of numbers, it really changes your behavior. And so hopefully when you think about data culture and you think about improving your organizations, you saw some ideas for how to get data deployed to your users across all these different devices, saw some different integration scenarios of the fun stuff we're doing with Power BI, and look forward to seeing how you guys use the set of technologies we're developing. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Kamal.
It would have been nice to measure Patrick's stress level in the demo. I think I suspect it's dropped now, but it may have peaked a little bit at that point in time. That's what happens. So now what we want to do is talk a little bit more about Power BI, and then we have Christian just warming up the engines here. This is like the grand finale about to happen. So he's revving, and you can hear the big boom from in the back somewhere. But anyway, till we get there. So important to point out, Power BI and the Microsoft BI platform, we talk a lot about the cloud, and it's a cloud-based solution, but it's hybrid in nature. I think you all know this, but it's worth repeating. Patrick showed us Power BI report server, which is running on premises. And so there you could take a Power BI desktop report, and instead of publishing in the cloud, publish it on premises. And so you have a choice. You can keep your data on premises and run the insights in the cloud. You can run everything in the cloud. You can run everything on premises. It's BI on your terms. You decide what works. Cloud, on premises, hybrid, any combination thereof can be put together to deliver solutions that you can then consume in any way you want. So we sometimes sort of don't stress it enough, and I want to repeat that it's truly a hybrid solution, and you have control and governance about how you deploy it. So with that said, Power BI has been out for about 2 years plus, and if you've been following the growth, it's been pretty stunning, actually. It's been a really, really amazing growth story for Power BI. And it's not just me talking about it, but if you look at what the analysts are saying, people who are paid to go and tell customers what to use and what kind of products. And Gartner is certainly the top one that comes to mind. And they have something called the Magic Quadrant that tries to go and place people as leaders and challengers, and how do they do well in terms of execution, in terms of vision. And this chart up there that you can see talks about the BI quadrant, Magic Quadrant, and you can see how it's laid out. And I think the picture speaks for itself. Microsoft, certainly a leader in there, very, very well positioned and been doing incredibly well. And I'll always tell people, just take a look at this if you want validation from someone besides Microsoft talking their own talk about this. So with that said, it's just not about Gartner saying, hey, this is good or bad, and giving feedback, but it's customers. I mean, I can now honestly say, no matter where I go, what kind of company I go to, somebody is using Power BI somewhere. It's almost a given. To the point where if you look at any segment you want, from retail to consumer goods to finance to operations to healthcare, any kind of segment you go, you will find a big name company using Power BI in a really, really big way. And these logos are some representations of that. My favorite example of this, and I travel a lot, I travel all kinds of places, and I tend to fly a lot through Heathrow. Heathrow Airport is one that I go through a lot. And I didn't realize till recently that Heathrow Airport actually uses Power BI. And so here's a video talking about Heathrow and its use of Power BI. So let's take a look. That it just gives me the goosebumps. I mean, it's amazing. I fly to Heathrow a lot, and they use Power BI. Who knew? Who would have thunk, as they say? With that said, these guys and everybody else we talk to, the data is bigger and bigger. It's all about big data. And I think if you talk to most companies, nobody has small data. I mean, that's like a given. I mean, who would admit to that? But it turns out it's really about large-scale data, and how do you make sense, not just have big data, but interactively make sense on big data. How do you slice and dice really huge amounts of data? So this morning in the keynote, we had Christian show, what was it?
10 billion.
10 billion rows, a billion here, a billion there. I'm like, that's interesting, but let's see more. Like, it's nice, no offense, 10 billion is good.
No offense taken.
But the question is, what else can you do? And so Christian's here to prove us that 10 billion is nothing.
Absolutely. Wouldn't pick
go
it
for
up
it
on the way to work if I saw it. Thank you so much, Kamal.
All yours.
All right. Okay, thanks, guys. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm going to show you actually how we are transforming interactive analysis on massive data sets. Not just big data, I'm talking massive, all right? Who was here for the keynote this morning? Pretty much everyone. Great. Okay, so I'm going to be using this data set. This data set is generated by a smartphone app that allows users in social networks to monitor each other's locations in real time, okay? Each row in this activity table represents an individual location, and this location count measure gives us the count of all the rows in the table, okay? I'm going to casually drag it onto the canvas. This is Power BI Desktop, the tool that I know and love that I use every day. Everything looks completely normal at this point. And how many rows do you think are in this table? We started with 10 billion this morning. Do you think higher or lower than 10 billion? What do you think? Higher? What? 20 billion? Higher?
50, come on.
50 billion? 50 billion? All right, let's find out. How many? This is actually Believe it or not, this is a trillion. This is a trillion rows, right? This is 1/4 of a petabyte of data from HDI Spark. I know what you're thinking. We are defying the laws of physics. How is this even physically possible? Fear not, all will be revealed. All right, so let's carry on. Just look at how interactive this is, right? I can bring location count again. I can break it out by day. I can make it a chart. I can break it out by occupation. It's like slicing and dicing through butter, right? You know what this is, right? Clicky, clicky, draggy, droppy data analysis over massive data sets. That's how we roll, right? Okay, now, I know what you're thinking. This is physically impossible. But wait, all will be revealed, right? So let's break this out by, filter it by only the locations that are the last location in a day where the user happened to travel over 100 miles. So naturally, we get these spikes on 4th of July, Memorial Day, etc. But interestingly, we have this spike over here, which shows that there are a lot of student movements on March 27th, which happens to be around the spring break timeframe, okay? So let's dig a little deeper, and let's bring in, say, distance. We'll make it a table and break it out by username. So just like that, I've interactively created a report that shows me all of the students who traveled over 100 miles on March 27th, right? And don't forget, this is over 1/4 of a petabyte of data in HDI Spark, right? How is this even physically possible? So here is the secret sauce. We are actually, and by the way, if you know Power BI, you know that we achieve blazing fast query performance by caching data into memory, right? Now, even with our compression ratios, 1/4 of a petabyte is kind of marginally a lot. So what we're actually doing is we're caching the data at the aggregated level, right? Which means that we can get this slice and dice behavior. We can unlock these massive data sets using a fraction of the memory requirements, right? What does this mean? It just unlocks these massive data sets in a way that was just not possible before, okay? But I know what you're thinking. What then if the user wants to drill down to the detail level where there is no cache, right? Do they need to write some Spark SQL? Do they need to go and run a different report? No, they can use this single semantic model that is reused throughout an enterprise organization, and if they happen to go down to the detail level where there is no cache, it will just submit a direct query to, in this case, HDI Spark, okay? Let me demonstrate. So let's say we want further info on this particular student. I'm going to use the new drill through feature in Power BI, which will take us over to this page. And this one is going to actually show us the individual locations for this user on this day. And it's querying the 1 trillion row table as I speak from HDI Spark, okay? Because there is no cache, so it's querying the table. In fact, let me show you the query that's actually being run live. And if we come in here, and here you can see that this query is actually running, and this is the user that we filtered on, okay? So naturally, this takes, you have to forgive it. It takes 30 seconds to query a 1 trillion row table, okay? So if we switch back over here, this is almost done. There it is. And now we can see the individual locations emitted by the app for this particular user who, fitting the hypothesis that these are students going back to college after spring break, this student started off in Lake Havasu in California. You may know is a popular destination for students in spring break. And he or she then made their way to Las Vegas and then took a plane all the way to the East Coast. And you'll notice that this person did not put their cell phone in airplane mode, right? There was no crash, right? The airplane arrived in its destination. And then if we actually drill down to the actual end point, you'll see that this student actually ended up just north of MIT. If I just zoom in a little bit further, you'll be able to see it. There it is. You can just about see MIT right there. Okay? So obviously a smart cookie. The point being, we unlocked 1/4 petabyte of data in a way that could not be done before, right? We went from a 1 trillion row, not 10 billion, 1 trillion row aggregated cell value. We sliced and diced that like it was butter. Clicky, clicky, draggy, droppy data analysis, right? And then we drilled down to the detail level where there was no cache, but that's okay. It submitted a direct query to Spark. Thank you very much. That's how we're transforming interactive analysis over massive data.
Thank you, Christian. Fantastic. My favorite new term is clicky, clicky, draggy, draggy, droppy, droppy. That's what I use all the time. A couple of things to point out. This massive analysis that you saw at scale actually is a preview. It's not quite ready to come out yet, so we'll be making announcements later on. But you can imagine this kind of at-scale analysis is coming from us soon. So thanks again. And there was a lot of people asking about this, and hope you like that. So now with that said, a couple of quick announcements. Please go to the Power BI blog. We have made lots of announcements there. One particular one that I want to highlight is that we have a new version of the Power BI report server. Lots of people asked for it. There's been a lot of demand. It's there now. The blog gives details on all the great goodies that are coming with it. Also, besides on the on-prem server, we also are releasing something we call business-to-business capabilities to go and share Power BI reports with people outside the organization seamlessly without having to worry about their accounts and signing in and all that. And that's a great part of what you get with Power BI Premium. And that's something that's also being announced on the blog. And then the last thing to talk about announcements in that same genre of things is that you can go to Azure, obviously, now and buy Power BI embedded. So you can work along with SQL, Spark, whatever you want to build Azure solutions with Power BI in Azure directly, okay? And then we also talked about Esri. Esri now allows you to go and buy a premium paid subscription on top of what they have free in Power BI, so you can unlock many, many more capabilities than what we have today in Power BI in the free version. With that said, we are at the end of time for this particular presentation now. My only ask of you would be to, hey, go back to your organizations, digest what you all saw, see how we can go back and maybe drive digital transformation in your about and try some of the great things you saw today in Power BI. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you all coming here and hope you have a fantastic conference.